Hello, Art World, and welcome back to my channel. We're going to be taking a look at one of the drawings I did. It's a Court of Owls inspired drawing. I don't know if anyone's ever read the New 52 Batman Court of Owls by Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder. Uh, it's really good. It's a very good. I recommend it. Um, Really interesting graphic novel. Um, so I was flipping through the pages and I decided, I'm gonna do my own version of this character. I like characters a lot. I like to create my own characters. I have been for years. So um, I like to also revamp or add to or kind of change the style of other characters sometimes. It seems like a really good exercise in creativity. Um, I'm not, you never want to steal someone's ideas or exactly replicate them, but you can build on them, you can redesign, you can do all these other cool things. So that's basically what I'm doing here, taking the idea and kind of changing it a little bit. There are some things that stay the same. Just trying to have fun with this one though. Not looking to create a new character out of it or anything like that. But that's not either how I create my characters. My characters are completely original, the ones that I create. But sometimes, like I said, I like to go in and redo other characters that are more, um, I guess, mainstream. So I've recently been doing this. It's not something I've always done. This is something I'm just getting into because I feel like people really like familiarity, and they like to see revamps on characters, and I like that. I like when other characters, for example, like when other characters are redone. Like for example, the Garfield. Uh, I forget who did it, but someone took Garfield and made him basically made an evil version of Garfield, and I thought that was so cool. So I kind of try to do that from time to time. But this one is very similar to the way the character looks. So I'm basically just practicing my line work here, practicing shading technique, and just seeing what I can do with one pencil. I always try to use just this one pencil that I've had in my toolkit for quite some time. I think it's called like a mechanical pencil. They have special sharp pencil sharpeners for them, and there's no eraser. But I use a kneaded eraser to erase with, because I find I get a really uh, good. Um, I can control my eraser marks very well with um, the kneaded eraser because it's malleable. You can reshape it. You can get really fine eraser marks. It doesn't wear the same way as a regular eraser would. So I recommend those as well. Picking one of those up if you are going to be uh, getting serious about creating your. Oh, this is repeating. Whoops. Okay, great. That's all. Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties. My um, drawing, my video and my drawings had a second had duplicated somehow, so I was just erasing that. Might edit this out too. But so working on my line work here, shading technique. A really good way to shade is just making simple lines. From what I've seen, I see other artists sometimes make it's called hashing. you make hash marks. So that's a really good thing to do, is get into, to steady your hand and to get used to that. You want to do it every day. But draw hash marks in different directions at varying speeds, and try to control them. At first, making them straight, then as you get better at that, start making some curved hash mark lines, and work on that. If you research, you'll be able to find some. I'm sure there's tutorials out there. Maybe I'll put one out there eventually, and get more in depth with this. If people start really watching more, I'll make some more videos and get more in depth about exactly what I used to do a long time ago to get better with my pencil work. And it was a lot of I didn't do it that often. I have done it though. This is the way I was taught. I only took basically one art class in college, but I was in for graphic design. But the art class that I did take, they had us drawing, and it did help a little bit, these hash marks in different directions, varying consistency. Some were curved, some were squiggly, some, S-shaped or Z-shaped, or and you can get creative with that. You can make them any way you want. But practicing that at some point is a good idea, to get comfortable with it. I always had that ability to do that, so it came very naturally, and I got bored with it really quickly, so I didn't spend too much time doing it. But I am glad that I did find out about that, because it did teach me, it did show me that there's a lot you can do with these lines. Basically, instead of what I used to do was basically smudge the pencil and make varying lines all over the page, and then kind of smudge it all together. And I thought that's what shading was. Now, that is a technique, you can do that, but I find it more interesting. My works are more interesting when there's actually lines that define the shadows, rather than just dark areas or smudged areas. Some people like that, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. There's some really amazing work out there where people use those smudger tips, and they smudge the pencil all over the page, and it looks beautiful. I mean, it comes out wonderful. But like I said, I've always been more attracted to comic book art, and typically the way they draw is with these lines, basically. There are other techniques, but this is a good foundation to start with if you're venturing into, wanting to create more graphic images that kind of pop out and look more like comic book art. It's a really cool technique. So basically just varying line weights define the shadows. So creating dark areas, maybe you want to use, and there's a lot of ways to achieve a darkened area. You can press harder with the pencil, making the lines darker. You can do more lines. You can cross hatch, so drawing lines in one direction, then drawing lines in the opposite direction, then drawing lines in the opposite direction, all of the exact same line weight. Or you can vary that line weight in your cross hatching, or you can do a lot of other stuff. So become creative with it, but become aware of it. It's a good technique to get started on your journey. So here I want to talk about this. So this character, obviously the Court of Owls character, it's Batman's enemy in the Court of Owls, and so I thought it fitting to add Batman into, or Batman inspired a silhouette in the background. I thought that would look really cool. So because I kind of wanted him, to be overlooking this guy. When I create a work, it almost is like you're giving life to the character. So you always want to consider, if you are into character design, you always want to consider, every aspect of the character, their background, who their enemies would be, you want to consider these things so it's more believable. The story is more real, and it's more interesting when there's, more to the character than just, a picture or a name. Getting in depth is it's important when you're designing a character. You wanna know, their height. You want that to remain consistent. You want to know what kind of weapons do they use, what kind of this and that, and considering all these things is fairly important to creating. So, sorry for flipping it upside down here. I will rotate that maybe in editing. I'll rotate it back if it becomes too long. But yeah, just adding a little Batman type character in the background, just a silhouette, and I wanted him like overlooking this guy. So it's fun to consider, a character and his enemies and what would be going on in the mind of the character, and what his enemies would be thinking, and that stuff is fun to think about. So so in this area here, I'm just doing simple cross hatching with many little similarly consistent lines for the silhouette in the background there. So what I'll do is I'll cross hatch, I'll draw curved lines in sequence to achieve this look that I'm going for, and then I'll go over an outline with a little bit more pressure. I'll do some outlining, and that really makes things pop. Like his arm there in front of him, you can see that there is some depth. You always want to consider your proportions. Obviously, you want to always remain consistent. So if his hand is closer to the observer, it's obviously going to be larger than the hand that's farther away. You don't want to make things too extreme. You can, and you can play with that. That's the fun thing about art, and that's the cool thing about it, is experimenting is the best part. There's things I say, oh, don't do that, and in the next video I might say that that's a good idea, because you learn something new every time you draw. Even some of the best artists in the world are still learning as they're drawing, and that's the fun thing about it. There's never an amount of drawing that you can do that everything. You will always learn something. So start today, start now, start drawing, and you'll see it's endless. The amount of things you can do with art, it's endless. Cars are designed with art. Characters are designed with art first, typically. Future tech art, it starts out as artwork, usually. Not all the time, not saying it's the only thing, but it's important. Comic book artists are very important. The world needs storytellers. The world needs people making visually stimulating things for us. We, as people, really enjoy cool looking things, good looking things, beautiful things, images. I think it plays into our psyche a lot. Number one, it's important for our mental health. It's important also for our progression. We need to, be creative in any field that we venture into. And art is really a nice foundation to have, or even something that you do in your spare time. I know there's doctors out there that paint and draw, and there's people out there that this is just a pastime for them, but it's something that is very liberating. Art is something that all people connect with, and I just want to pay some of my knowledge forward. So here I noticed that I try my best to keep my hand off of the areas that I've drawn, but sometimes it becomes so tedious that I just can't. It's very difficult. So to make it a little bit easier on myself, so that I can rest my hand, because out of habit, I always have rested my palm on the page as a brace when I draw, and it's a habit I'm trying to cut. I'm trying to just keep my hand up above the page now more, and just put a pinky down occasionally. But use I'm trying to use the middle part of my forearm on the edge of my desk to kind of, so that I'm off my hand is actually completely off the page. I'm trying to get used to doing that. Might be something you want to try as well. If you're noticing that you're smudging your work, that's one thing I used to get really frustrated with as a child. Like I would get more than halfway done with the work, and I'd be so into the drawing that I'd lift my hand and realize, oh my gosh, I just smudged all of the work I did, basically all of the work I did leading up to that point. So that was so disappointing. It was a letdown. It sucked, because it's something if you're working on it as a kid, and you take those things to heart. So I just didn't want to do that here. I got a piece of paper. This is a good technique, just grabbing a piece of paper and put that down, and don't let that slide around, because you can still smudge with the paper there if you leave it long enough and you move it around too much. So make sure it stays in one spot when you set it down and you put your hand on top of it. Don't let it slide around. So I hold with my left hand very firmly. I hold the paper in one spot. With my right hand, I place it, my drawing hand, I place that onto the paper with my palm, and I draw. Sorry about my dirty nails. I was working on my motorcycle the day that I did this drawing, so I apologize about that. But yeah, using lines, using these simple lines and varying weights, you can achieve anything. It's almost like you can achieve color at some point because of the way that you shade. If you get very skilled at it, it just, you're getting so much depth of range in grayscale that it almost feels like there should be color there, because it's so detailed. So that's what I'm working toward. I'm trying to achieve that. I'm trying to get good enough with my line work and my hatching and shading, which I'm not that great at right now. Working on it, I've learned all this on my own. I'm still picking up techniques every day. Every day I look at other artists' work, and I gain a little knowledge from them. I'm just guessing, though. I do have another job, so this is just, I do this for fun. But we're at the end of the video. I appreciate you tuning in. Please check me out at smartful_creations on Twitter, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks again for watching, and stay safe during the outbreak. Okay, later.